we expecting this Bears team to look like in week one? What are we expecting this Bears team to come out as in week one? And when you start to break that down, right, you have to look at what this team is coming from. You have to look at, I think preseason you do have to take into account a little bit, but you really have to look at what this team is coming from and how they come into this season. What I mean by that, they were undisciplined last season. While there were players with talent on this team, that talent was not properly utilized. While there were players that could have exceeded their talent last season, that talent was not properly utilized. While we had a coaching staff that said that they were going to run the ball, that ball was not run. This is going to be a completely different Chicago Bears team, and I believe that it starts here in week one. I think the thing to focus in on, there's two things for me, at least on the offensive side of the ball, that you really need to focus in on with the Chicago Bears team. First thing for me, and like the video if you agree, like the video if you disagree, just like the video. First thing for me, I think that when Ryan Poles as well, Matt Eberflus and Luke Getsy say, hey, I'm going to run the football. I'm going to run the football. I'm going to put this ball in David Montgomery, Khalil Herbert, and Treston Ebner's hands. I think that we'll actually see that versus the San Francisco 49ers. And I think this is the thing that you have to take into account with that as well. When you're looking at where this Bears team was last season and how they ran the football, the issue wasn't that the Bears couldn't run the football. The issue was that the coaching staff gave up on the run too quickly. Oh, well, you know what? We weren't getting 5 yards per carry on the football. So we just went away from the run. The problem is that doesn't exactly help young talent on your team. And guess what you had in at the quarterback position last year? Very, very young talent. The thing that the Bears kind of do have at an advantage, you heard Justin talk about it there, right, is that they do come into this situation already of playing this team. He knows what this defense is. It's basically the same defense as last year. And you're coming into a season with guys that at least have played against that opposite defensive line for the most part. Here's the one thing that I think you really have to key in on outside of that run game. I think the Bears will run the ball a lot. I think you'll see Montgomery doing a good job. I think that this will be a very serious year for Montgomery. What I mean by that is I think that Montgomery will be to the point where I will have a lot of argument on my running back position for, hey, should the Bears re-sign David Montgomery? I think that this is going to be the season where he's finally going to get to come out and attack more. But I also think that he's going to be schemed well with the defensive line or offensive line and in the positions he's going to be put in. Remember, last season versus the Browns versus the Niners, even all of that, right? Like the Bears were just running forward. They weren't doing things to the outside. They weren't doing things to move the pocket. They weren't doing things to move the offensive line around good and put them in a position to where David Montgomery could actually get a hole. I think the scheme is going to be more improved. I think the adjustments will be more improved. And so for me, right, in week one, I don't expect to see what we saw versus the Cleveland Browns. I've said this. Now, the play calling I expect to see, but the frequency that they went to the passing game versus the Cleveland Browns, I do not expect to see that, especially with the Nick Bosa out there, especially with that defense, the way that it's built, right? Because you're not going to get that vanilla defense. You listen, it looked a lot different just not having Myles Garrett out there chasing Justin Fields around. I don't expect to see him dropping back 25 times to pass the football. What I expect to see out of Justin Fields in this game is him going with the simple pass, the Bears scheming him up some simple reads, dropping back, this offensive line doing a lot of moving pockets, rolling pockets, getting him outside of the pocket. Those are the things that I expect to see here versus the San Francisco 49ers, because remember, that is a star-studded defense over there. And the other thing that I really think that we're going to see from this Bears team in week one is, and listen to this word, Bears fans, if Matt Nagy's out there, just give a listen here, Matt. Just give a quick listen here, Matt. I expect to see adjustments. Oh, good Lord. How do you do that? What is that? We haven't seen that in 4 years. I expect to see the Chicago Bears adjust. Guess what? If Nick Bosa's finding his way into the backfield, I expect to see Braxton Jones with some help. I'm also not losing my mind. Here's the thing, right? I do have the Bears winning a lot of games. I actually have the Bears winning this game versus San Francisco, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. But I do expect the Bears to win this game versus San Francisco. But here's the thing. I don't expect the Bears to win every single rep like Justin was talking about. I don't expect the Bears to go out there and win every single play like Justin was talking about. I don't expect the Bears to go out there and score touchdowns on every single drive. What I expect from this Chicago Bears team is for them to put their players in positions to be successful. If the talent doesn't equal up to the play calling, that's a situation that can be fixed. If the talent doesn't equal up to the play calling, that's a situation that we can adjust. But the play calling can't be the issue. And so I think we're going to see a team that is going to come out here. And if you see Nick Bosa starting to get into that backfield, they're going to adjust off of that. If you see this 49ers defense playing back, preparing for the pass, they're going to adjust off of that. If you see this 49, here's the thing too. I don't think they're handcuffed to the idea of a run heavy style of play, right? If all of a sudden they're playing up heavy and they're trying to blitz and you can get those easy passes over the top, I think Justin Fields is a good enough quarterback for you to do that. I don't think that this is going to be a game where they're going to go out there and they're going to leave their young guys to die. And I think that's the most important thing coming out of this week one. I think that the thing that we knew going into last season, I know the thing that we knew going into last season is they were going to leave their young guys on an island. They were going to let their young guys sink or swim. You know why? Because it was Matt Nagy's time to sink or swim. So they were going to let their young guys sink or swim. That's not going to be the case this season. That's not going to be the Chicago Bears this season. This Chicago Bears this season is going to help their young guys. I don't expect to see Braxton Jones out there by himself on Nick Bosa all night unless he's dominating Nick Bosa. If all of a sudden, right, he's just dominating Bosa, then it's like, wait a minute now, hold on, brother. What did we get in the fifth round? But I'm also not leaving week one and saying, oh, my goodness, right, like Braxton Jones is trash because he couldn't figure out how to stop Nick Bosa week one, right? Like, I think there's going to be a nice little there's going to be some Bears fans that have to come back to earth. And there's going to be some Bears fans that are going to be pleasantly surprised. Those are the two things that I really see happening in week one. Because I don't think the Bears are great. I've said this a million times. I don't think the Bears are a great team. I don't think the Bears are this dominant football team. And me having them at 9 wins is the middle. There are some Bears fans that think, oh, if the Bears are going to get 13, 11 wins with this schedule. I don't see that. But there's other Bears fans that think, oh, the Bears are going to get 3 wins. I think we're going to see a meeting of the middle here in week one. And that's something to be excited about. That's something to be excited about, Bears fans, because we're finally going to see a little bit eye to eye. At least that's how I feel. We'll see if it actually happens. Here's hoping, but we'll see if it actually happens. But I think you're going to see a little bit more eye to eye after week one. And I can't wait to have those conversations, man.